Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Happy July as you're watching, listening to this. We finally made it to July. The summer months are kind of almost behind us. We're getting there. June went by so quick, and part of that is probably because of the vacation for me. But just in general, I feel like June really flew by this year. I don't know if it did for you as well, Erin, just since you're probably used to them not flying by from your time in
Yeah.
the classroom. So now it probably feels a lot more speedy. But if you're watching, if you're listening, thanks so much for taking some time. As you can see, I have a new guest with me, Erin, who recently transitioned from education into instructional design. So we're going to talk
Mhm.
about that for sure. Just because I know there's so many of you that are watching, listening, that are kind of on your own journey of transitioning out of the classroom into something new, or even if you're just looking to hop from one career field to the next, not necessarily education. I know instructional design is kind of one of those popular industries right now that a lot of people can find the transferable skills to get into. So we're definitely going to talk about how you made that move, Erin. But thank you so much for jumping on here with me
Of
this week.
course, of course.
So if you're no stranger to the show, I start off just kind of talking about the week ahead. And it's been a little bit just because I was off last week. So when I talk about motivators, it's pretty easy to be motivated right now just because I had a week off of work. So I'm ready to get back into it, ready to catch up on things, catch up with the candidates that I have in the interview and hiring process. Shout out to my teammate Odyssey, who covered for me last week. Thank you, Odyssey. You're the best. And to everyone else on the team, because I'm sure it was a group effort there, but thank you to everyone. So that's the big motivator for me is, coming back from the vacation, but also in a holiday week. So you already have a short week to cram a bunch of stuff into coming off of a week long vacation. So it's going to be a little hectic for me this week as I catch up, which is good. I like to keep busy, stay busy. So that is it. A motivator for me is just to make sure that before the Thursday holiday, I am back and ready to go into it. And then the other big motivator for me, my daughter turns 5 this coming weekend. So
Yeah.
have the big party planned. We have Princess coming. She has her friends from school, our friends. It's a big to do. You only turn 5 once. That's what we've been telling ourselves that. So doing that this weekend. So looking forward to catching up with some friends, some family, people that we haven't seen in quite some time. It's as much a party for the parents as it is for our daughter at this point. So looking forward to doing those celebrations too. So those are the motivators for me. Goals for the week ahead, I already kind of touched on that. It's just kind of playing catch up, being off for a week and then having a short week. I got to make sure I'm on top of everything. So following up with the hiring managers, catching up with the candidates, all of them were in good hands with Odyssey, but want to make sure that I'm doing things on my part too to ensure that that transition back to me is a smooth one for them. So always the candidate and hiring manager experience at the forefront for us on the talent acquisition team. So making sure I'm doing my part in that as well. And then a win from the week before, it's pretty self-explanatory, a vacation. It was nice to just kind of unplug, unwind. You don't hear me complain about my job, and I do love it, but still that week away, just to take some time for yourself is always a good thing. So coming off the win for that for me is going to be pretty key because I don't have any more trips planned really for the rest of the year, any week-long trips anyway. We already did Disney, now we did the beach. That's it for me. I'm like long weekend trips maybe, but nothing too crazy for the rest of the year. So that's my week. Erin, what's going on in your world this week?
So beginning of July, we are my team on our project. We're heading into our second official month of production on the project that we're working on. So it's pretty exciting. We're settling into a groove with our processes and getting everything figured out. So that's the further along we get into that process, like the more exciting it is to actually, like really be building and everything. So keeping that momentum and getting to enjoy every step of that is definitely a big motivator to keep pushing. We do everything in 2-week sprints. So because we follow agile methods. So just maintaining that cohesiveness on our team is definitely the big motivator
Yeah.
to keep everything going. It's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we should be moving into actually building out some of our lessons and moving into some of the new content with the way that we actually, are going through we're in the process right now of figuring out like which kind of software we're going to be using. So hopefully we will have that sorted soon so we can actually build those lessons. So that's what I'm really, really excited for. The goals are to just keep knocking out the plans, keep creating really awesome content, because we've been doing a really good job with that so far. And I'm really excited to see everything that we've done. So yeah, that's where we're kind of at heading into July. I'm really excited to see where we go.
Nice, nice. Yeah, it's nice to
Yeah.
be able to see all the work that you put in and see it come to fruition there. It's
Yeah,
definitely
absolutely.
a huge win and not something that you get all the time, especially with content creation. So it's nice
Hmm.
to kind of see all of that.
Yeah,
Amazing.
pretty
So
awesome.
you and I connected a few months ago. You were
Hmm.
still in the classroom, and we kind of chatted just about kind of what you were looking to do. And at that point, you had mentioned instructional design was one of the things that you were interested in pursuing and possibly wanted to take your career direction into. And
Yeah.
obviously now you've made that move. So hey,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Yay.
But when you and I were talking about that, what specifically about the instructional design industry like appealed to you that you made that one of your priorities when it came to your job search? Like this feels like the absolute right fit for me.
Um, One of the biggest things was like when I started, this was my third time trying to get out of the classroom. It took a long time. And I didn't really, the first couple of times I tried, I didn't really have a plan, and I didn't really sit down and, evaluate like what kind of skills I was, working with, and what I could take, to a new company when I ultimately did finally end up leaving the classroom. So that
Mhm.
was one of the big differences this time around. So when I started my planning and, making the moves, I sat down and made a list of the skills that I had, and not just, once like the list was done and I knew what kind of things I was working with, it wasn't just what can I do? It was also what do I enjoy? Um, and two of the biggest things that I loved about teaching and education was building the content, which, kind of pushed me more towards instructional design, and then the organization and planning, which the other direction I was possibly planning on going was project management. So based on, what I could do, what I liked to do, I knew I had two paths
Mhm.
that were ultimately going to end up being the way to go for me. And, the cards fell where they did, and instructional design is ultimately where I ended up.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that you've kind of made that transition, a lot of times, and I'm sure you're starting to help people who are transitioning into a new position now and having those discussions. Common question that you get and that I get is, what were some of those transferable skills from the classroom that you highlighted? So when you made instructional design your focus and project management too, you can talk about both, but what were some of those skills that you really relied upon that you had developed during your time as an educator that you kind of highlighted, showcased during those initial outreach to the hiring managers or recruiters of saying, hey, I've done this, it might not say it exactly on my resume, but here are the skills that you were looking for, and here's how it aligns to what I've done.
One of the biggest things that kind of helped me out and, made me stand out when people, took my education experience into account. I've built courses from the ground up. At the school that I was at when I ultimately ended up leaving, I was the first and only person to teach forensic science on that campus. I was brought in specifically to teach that class, so it had never been done before on that campus. So that required me to, do the research, figure out what the standards were, and build the class with the progression that, it needed to follow. So that was building content 100% from scratch, not only from just what needed to be taught, the notes that the kids needed to take, but, any of my interactive materials, actual assignments, so that was all stuff that I could bring in from either direction, because that is absolutely project management
Yeah.
and it's instructional design. That is as deep into content creation as you can possibly get, is building a new class.
Yeah.
So that really, I think, really helped me stand out with those skills, because it encompassed everything.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the interview portion because preparing for an interview in the corporate world is very different from preparing for an interview in the educational world. And
Definitely.
going into both is overwhelming. I remember my first
Mhm.
interview to be a teacher. I absolutely bombed it, and I knew like the second it was over, I was like, "Yep, nope, not getting a call back there." But it's kind of that growing curve of like how you develop that from there, and it's the
Right.
same when you go into corporate. So what were some of the ways that you tried to prepare for these interviews? What were some of the things that you chose to highlight when you were preparing for the questions that you figured you would be asked as part of this process?
So the one thing that I did was I researched tons and tons. I can't even tell you how long I spent on Google once I knew I was going to have an interview, how long I spent on Google searching most common interview questions. So I was searching for common technical questions for instructional design, specifically common cultural questions. And I filled a notebook with those questions and potential answers, not necessarily a fully fleshed out answer,
Mhm.
just to get my thoughts on paper and kind of organized so that I had things that I had already thought of, so I didn't do the dreaded awkward
Right.
moment in an interview. um because one piece of advice that was given to me a long time ago, I don't even remember who said it. I mainly tried to make my personality come through.
Mhm.
You can teach skills, you can teach anybody anything that you need them to do, but you can't make someone a good employee or a good coworker if the personality and attitude isn't there. So that was the main thing that I focused on. Just letting them know who I actually was. Yeah, I have skills, of course, but I always tried to tie who I actually was into those questions. The interview is the one thing that I've always felt confident with.
Okay.
As introverted as I am, I can talk to people. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that part, it was just making sure that if any curveballs got thrown at me, which they actually ended up, that happened, that I was prepared. I
Yeah.
thought my first interview was going to be a cultural interview, so I spent the entire time preparing for that, and it was not. It was technical. And I had not spent time prepping, but it worked out
Yeah.
because I got the job. So
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things you don't really think. I mean, you're in front of a classroom of 20, 30 students. They're like, oh yeah, I can talk. And then
yep.
there's that one question sometimes that you're like, man, I should have prepared for that.
Yeah,
So, so yeah, that's
100%.
so beyond preparing for the interview, the other question that I get a lot, I'm sure you've gotten it now too, is changes to the resume. Because you always have a very obvious educator teacher resume when you're coming out of the classroom. And
Yeah,
there's a lot
definitely.
of things that you need to change. So what were some of those things that you found most beneficial as you were going through the process of highlighting your skills, highlighting your experience to make sure that you were pulling from that education experience and showcasing that to on a resume for a corporate role?
To honestly, I relied on AI.
Yeah.
I used a service called Teal. That it is a paid service. Unfortunately, I guess it is a weekly pay kind of a thing. But the resume was always the thing that I was the weakest at. I've never been good at writing a resume. And then you add in the complication of having to translate my teacher speak into corporate speak. And that was just another hurdle to jump through. So I was like, I have to learn how to do this somehow. So I used AI to translate my resume. And then I took what it gave me and changed the wording, and the formatting and everything so that it looked like something I would produce. It sounded like me.
Mhm.
One of the biggest things that I did, I got rid of that objective section. Because
Yeah.
that is outdated apparently. I didn't get super in my head about getting through the tracking system thing. I know that is one thing that you hear constantly, like, how do I beat the ATS? I didn't even worry about that.
Yeah.
Um, the main thing came down to what format should it be. So I spent more time adding bullet points into my most recent opportunities, adding in like actual measurable things that I did. So, an example of that, I grew the AP Environmental Science program at my school, which is the last thing that I taught. I started out with 86 kids in a program that I inherited, and in 1 year I grew by 125%. So those kind of metrics were the things that I was putting in there to make sure that, you know, non-education people could be like, okay, that's an impressive stat.
Yeah.
But the language definitely was the hardest part, for sure. So thank you, AI, for that.
Yeah. And I love that you pointed out the ATS, because as a recruiter, that's one of the frustrating questions I get a lot, because when people say, how do I beat the ATS? There are some that utilize various things. We're not one of them. So I'm always like, oh, I can't really guide you on that, because technically I am the ATS. And so
Yeah.
I'm trying to find those skills myself. So highlight them, but you don't have to have like a trick or a maneuver to get around that typically.
Yeah.
So when I have people on who have made the move from the classroom to their new role, I always like to kind of give you the chance. Now, you've been doing this for a few months. What has stood out to you early on of like, these are the things I enjoy most about this new position that I'm in? What are some of those things that you're like, this is what I was hoping for, and I've gotten to achieve that, and how it aligns with your overall career goals now that you're in this position?
One of the biggest things that was driving me away from the classroom was just the lifestyle and what it did to your life, the environment that you were in. And the thing that struck me the most when I started at, the company that I'm at now, is that people were happy.
Mm-hmm.
People were happy. There was laughing in the office every single day. People are willing to talk to each other and help each other. Not once. I started there on April 22nd, and not once on any day have I ever felt like I couldn't go to anybody and ask for help if I needed it. And that is definitely something I was scared to do when I was in the classroom. I was the only one who taught my subject, so I was already kind of alone. But there's such a sense of camaraderie in my office. Like people, like it really feels like the word team is valued and not just a label that's slapped on because it's something that's supposed to be there.
Right.
And it was, I hate to say that it was shocking, because it shouldn't be that way.
Right.
That's what work should be like.
Yeah.
But it was a culture shock,
Yeah.
a little bit, because I came from a fairly toxic school environment.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I'm amazed. I don't dread getting up and going to work every day. I love the actual work that I'm doing,
Yeah.
because of that, I get to focus on the parts that I like all day, every day.
Yeah.
So those are the biggest things, that I noticed.
Yeah. No more Sundays.
It's been great.
That's awesome. So I mentioned it earlier, you and I connected a few months ago because you were, doing this as part of your networking search. Who can I talk to? Who can I get insight from? So how important was that as part of that search to get to where you are now? What are some of the questions that you like to ask people when you are connecting with them in terms of picking their brain on either how they got into the field that they're in or how they made the move from one field to another? And then second part of the question is, now you're starting to do that yourself and give back. So what are some of the key pieces of insight that you try to give to others as you're helping them along in their own search?
LinkedIn was crucial, like 100% crucial. I would not have my job if it wasn't for LinkedIn. My job came from a referral from a random connection on like a Social Saturday post.
Okay.
From someone, and she just randomly popped up. And as people, especially former teachers, were popping up in my suggested or making comments on those Social Saturdays, I would connect with as many people as possible. I would always try to remember to send a little note. Sometimes I would forget, of course, we all do that. And she just happened to be one of those people that I connected with, and we chatted a little bit. And then a few weeks later, she reached out and she was like, hey, my company has an office in Orlando where you are, and we're hiring. And I was like, awesome. And here I am.
Yeah.
But yeah, those Social Saturday posts definitely were a very, very huge part of my process. LinkedIn is the one thing that I really did differently this time around. I've had a profile for years, but I never really used it.
Right.
And I leaned into it very, very heavily. And the networking was far and away the most important. It is scary to cold network with people that you don't know.
Yeah,
But it paid off.
Yeah.
It absolutely paid off, and it was what ended up being the most valuable for me was just talking to people who had been in my shoes and could understand. Because a lot of people in my life don't understand.
Yeah.
Um, you know, there's a there's a lot of conversation about what the education industry is like right now, and it, as with many things, you can't understand it unless you've done it.
Right.
So talking to everyone on LinkedIn, one, it was providing me with support. Um, and the other thing is that it was giving me hope
Mhm.
because they were showing me that it could be done because it felt really hopeless
Yeah.
sometimes. And seeing people who had done it, knowing that it was possible and hearing their stories on days when I didn't want to apply for jobs, that made me send out a few more resumes. So it really kept me going. It was one of those things that propelled me a lot, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So last question is kind of one that you've already answered, alluded to, but still want to bring it up just because it's one that I ask anyone, and I like the variety of answers that I get, and that's kind of that advice portion. So, like we mentioned, you're starting to give back and help other people who are trying to transition into a new role, and you've talked about being authentic and letting your personality shine through. But is there any other key advice that you've either received along the way that you felt was very beneficial to you, or a key piece that you're finding yourself constantly giving to other people when they ask you for other advice?
I think the number one thing is that, yes, it's a hard journey. It's not easy to do for a variety of reasons. It's a tough job market. As teachers, we deal with a lot of imposter syndrome and really wondering if we're going to be stuck, if this is all we're good at and all we're good for. And the advice that I got a lot and that I have continued to give is to ignore that voice, because you're more than a teacher.
Yeah,
It's not your identity. It doesn't have to be your identity. And you have so many things that you can bring to the table. And it's not an easy journey, but you will never, if you quit at the journey, you won't forgive yourself for that.
yeah,
And once you do hop that fence, the amount of things that are going to open up for you are going to make you look back and say, yeah, 100%, this was worth it. And I'm so glad I stuck it out.
yeah,
Um, so it's, yeah, ignore the negative self-talk. It's so easy to fall into that trap and just hang on because there's some position out there for everybody. It might take a little bit of time to find it, but it's always worth it no matter how long it takes.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Erin, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on here with me
Of
and for all
course.
the valuable insight and advice that you've given. If you're not connected with Erin yet, we've talked about networking, its importance, and how difficult it is. So here are two people who are open to accepting and talking and chatting with you about career transitions or
Always.
anything else that you might be interested in. So connect with Erin, connect with myself if you aren't already. You probably are if you're seeing, hearing this, but make sure you're connecting with Erin as well. We hope you
Yes.
have a great week ahead, and we will see you next Monday.